your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Thanks for joining us for our Week in Review. I'm Naveen Day. The issue of tent encampments in our city has continued to be a hot topic of discussion. Lethbridge City Council voted 7-1 in favor of approving funding for $230,000 to assist in administrative and policing shortfalls to hurry forward with compassionate cleanups of tent sites here in our city. The money will come from the city's corporate budget contingencies.
It may seem to many that we're not being compassionate, but over the past few weeks, I want to just talk to a few different emails that I'd received, starting with 4 tents here a couple days ago to 12 tents this morning to over 45 now in one particular area. A shooting in the area. That's not safe for anyone, as these areas aren't safe for whether you're homeless or if you have a home, or those that are visiting our community. It's just not a safe area. It's been proven. We've seen this happen.
Council also voted for a later date to present an additional $470,000 to help assist with additional cleanup that goes beyond traditional encampments. One Lethbridge woman says she is outraged at the city's handling of the tent encampment situation. Sarah Villeburn, who attended Tuesday's council meeting, says it's frustrating to see the city just shuffle the problem. She says the best solution would be to find an appropriate housing option for the homeless.
We know the solution, so the question is, why are we not doing it? When we're throwing money at security, we're asking for more funds to go to LPS. Yes, LPS needs more funds, but do we need more funds for an encampment cleanup? Specifically, no. We need to allocate that money where it needs to go, and that is on housing. They know the solution, and that's where the anger is. We can't just keep shuffling somebody under a bridge from the shelter to the Civic Oval. You know, we're shuffling the problem when we know what the solution is.
Villeburn adds that some of her family is currently living in the encampments, which makes the situation more heartbreaking for her. Continuing our focus on the encampment site, residents and protesters prepared themselves to confront city cleanup crews who arrived at the site Thursday morning. They believed the workers were coming to tear down the tent encampment site as part of a $230,000 allocation City Council recently approved on Tuesday for encampment cleanup. The crews were, in fact, only there to remove garbage and any other waste the residents wished to dispose of. Activist Chris Rowley says the misunderstanding was a result of poor communication from the city.
These tents are their homes, and so having somebody come and force themselves on them is very intrusive. So I think that it was not very clear to the individuals on what was expected. And so I think there's a lot of misunderstanding from the people and the clean sweep or the city on what is actually going on.
Meanwhile, the city's homeless are becoming more vocal about the problems they are facing. They say the blame for unavailability of affordable housing should be placed squarely at the feet of the leaders of all levels of government.
This is what Justin Trudeau, and this is Jason Kenney. To sometime the mayor of Lethbridge. This is affordable housing. What Jason Kenney promised Albertans, not just Aboriginal, he promised affordable housing. Other provinces have done it. When is he actually going to put shovels in the ground and do it?
A special puppy has been named by the Lethbridge Police Service. The Belgian Malinois was given the name of Bridge. 13-year-old Cassie Houghton was the winner of the naming contest and was presented with a stuffed Malinois along with a tour of the police station. The dog naming contest saw 700 entries in total. Constable Braylon Higgin with the K9 unit says the new four-legged officer will do great work in the city to help sniff out crime.
A lot of times we will have people that run from us or hide, and without a dog in the sense of their smell, we would not be able to find them. So we have found people hiding in garbage cans that normally we probably wouldn't even look in when somebody runs from a break and enter. We've tracked people anywhere from 5 kilometers through the river valley to locating people inside businesses. So that's will be part of his job, everything from locating evidence to searching buildings and compounds. We've had people found in our own police compound before that have broken in there and hidden in cars, and our dogs have been able to go in and find them a lot quicker than what we would do have them go car to car to search under everything that's in vehicles. So.
Bridge is only 4 months old and will be ready to hit the streets by the year 2024. After the break, stories from around our province. Keep it right here.
I'm here to hear that apology on behalf of all generations.
On Monday, Pope Francis started his Canadian tour here in Alberta and apologized for the role the Roman Catholic Church played in residential schools. Francis gave an address while visiting the former Erminskin Indian Residential School at Mesquiches, Alberta. The Pope left Alberta on Wednesday and flew to Quebec. Speaking at Quebec City's historic Citadel, the Pope expressed shame and sorrow for the role Catholic institutions played in the, quote, deplorable residential school system. He asked forgiveness for the harm done by the policies of assimilation carried out in the schools.
Because I carry my grandmother and my mother inside of me. And so I'm here to hear that apology on behalf of all generations.
It is necessary, in admitting our faults, to work together to accomplish a goal that I know all of you share, to promote the legitimate rights of the Native populations and to favor processes of healing and reconciliation between them and the non-Indigenous people in the country.
We will have more reaction to the Pope's visit later in our show. 7 candidates running to be the next leader of the United Conservative Party squared off in a heated debate Wednesday night at the Halo Air Ambulance hangar in Medicine Hat. BCN's Angela Stewart was there for the showdown and tells us the candidates covered a variety of topics, including the Sovereignty Act and Daniel Smith's controversial cancer comment.
In the first official UCP leaders debate, 7 candidate hopefuls took to the stage here in Medicine Hat Wednesday evening, vying to become the next leader of the UCP that would ultimately replace Jason Kenney.
About the next step. The next step? What do you mean the next step after autonomy?
Considered to be a front-runner in this race, Danielle Smith was in the hot seat for much of the night, speaking to her stance on the Sovereignty Act as well as a specific policy she'd bring in if elected.
I'd love to talk more about the Sovereignty Act because it's absolutely essential.
And we would start building out our business parks with the infrastructure that we need to be able to attract business here. I don't need to wait for Ottawa's approval for us to enforce our right to develop our resources. It's Section 92A of the Constitution.
Many of the 7 candidates, including former Minister of Community and Social Services Raja Insani, criticized Smith's stance on the act, saying some of her policy ideas are damaging.
The Sovereignty Act is unconstitutional, is irresponsible, but at the same time, while all of that is happening, should she become leader, it is going to erode investor confidence here in Alberta.
And former Minister of Culture Leela Ahir says the act is unnecessary.
On one hand, that you have sections of the Constitution that you can use, and then to suggest you need a Sovereignty Act on top of that seems to me highly redundant, and I think we should use the ability and the tools that we have.
I just want to take a moment to clarify a comment I made in a podcast last week about cancer.
Smith has faced lots of criticism over the last week following her remarks, but she says her comment was just misunderstood.
I think it was a clear misunderstanding, and I apologize to anybody who was hurt by my comments. Everybody has a cancer story, and if you have to wait until late stage, your only options become radiation and chemo and surgery, and those are really expensive and really hard on the body. That's all I meant.
Candidate hopeful Brian Jean says Smith needs to backtrack what she said.
Everybody makes mistakes, but when you make it, don't call it a misunderstanding, apologize and move on.
All the 7 candidates will be back for round 2 when they go head-to-head in Edmonton for their second debate on August 30th. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
While UCP members are deciding on who should be their next leader, current Alberta Premier Jason Kenney is still at work and earlier this week asked the Competition Bureau of Canada to investigate alleged price gouging at the pumps. Thursday afternoon, Kenney took to social media and shared a tweet from a University of Calgary economics professor that suggests Albertans are benefiting from the gas tax cut in full. However, Dan McTague, the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, says gas retailers have been playing the alleged collusion game for quite some time.
reality is that gas stations have traditionally taken anywhere from 8 to 10 cents to 12 cents a liter. Now, of course, they're looking at margins on a day like today where they're charging $1.79.9, but it's costing them $1.37 to buy their fuel. That's extraordinary. That's a 42-cent retail margin, and strip away the GST, it becomes 39 cents. Strip away that traditional 10, 11, 12 cents, and now you're looking at 27 cents a liter net that they're adding to the price of gasoline, or that they're not passing on.
Up next, more hot button issues from Alberta as we hear from our legislative reporter, Tyler Dawson.
She sort of implied that up to that point, cancer was sort of up to the choices that an individual might make. And there was a really, really quick and immediate backlash from that. The New Democrats got in on it, and then she said, well, the New Democrats just don't want to talk about cancer prevention. But then her fellow leadership candidates attacked her as well. You know, Brian Jean saying that as someone who's lost family and friends to cancer, that was a hurtful thing to say.
Earlier this week in Alberta, the appeal win for the Pulowski brothers and the UCP leadership debate in Medicine Hat were hot topics. Hal Roberts and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, met to discuss these hot-button issues.
Tyler, a big story we've been covering here on Bridge City News was how the Alberta Court of Appeal set aside some of the charges against Pastor Arthur Pulowski, the street preacher in Calgary, his brother David, and Chris Scott, the owner of the Whistle Stop Cafe. It appears as though the court may have overstepped itself in sanctioning the three.
Yeah, it's a bit of a legally complicated story, as I understand it. But the gist is, yes, that they sort of went too far beyond what the Crown and the defense were sort of arguing about when it came to convicting them. And it was so we went up to the Court of Appeal, and a three-judge panel, I guess, basically threw out these particular convictions, and they had primarily to do with contempt of court for sort of continuing to defy court orders. So, you know, the relevant thing here, I think, for sort of political purposes, is just that this story isn't done yet. The story of the pandemic, that the story of pandemic enforcement, that the discussion about lockdowns and all those sorts of things, even though the policies themselves are in the past, you know, there's still sort of the residual effects of this. And we're going to see, I think, as the UCP leadership race continues, when the House comes back in the fall, we're going to continue to see some of these debates ongoing.
Now, the race to succeed Jason Kenney as Premier continues to heat up. One of the front runners, Danielle Smith, found herself in a little bit of hot water recently. Tyler, what did Danielle Smith say exactly that received a little bit of backlash?
Well, she was on a podcast talking to a naturopath, and they were talking about cancer. And basically what she said was that when stage 4 cancer comes along, you have treatments, you have radiation, you have chemotherapy, those sorts of things. But she sort of implied that up to that point, cancer was sort of up to the choices that an individual might make. And there was a really, really quick and immediate backlash from that. The New Democrats got in on it, and then she said, well, the New Democrats just don't want to talk about cancer prevention. But then her fellow leadership candidates attacked her as well. You know, Brian Jean saying that as someone who's lost family and friends to cancer, that was a hurtful thing to say. Travis Taves, and pretty much everyone, Leela here, the whole sort of group of them really came down quite hard on her for this comment she'd made in the podcast. Whether or not that will matter remains to be seen, but it is the first, I would say, major slip-up that she's had in this campaign.
Has she backpedaled at all on that comment?
No, it doesn't seem like it. Rather, she seems to have sort of doubled down by talking about cancer prevention. It would not shock me, though, if she had to backtrack in the next little while, though.
Now, speaking of Danielle Smith, her Alberta Sovereignty Act is picking up some steam as well. Explain, Tyler, exactly how it works and why House Leader Jason Nixon says it's illegal and unenforceable.
The idea is basically that if this act was passed, the Alberta government could decide to ignore federal government laws, regulatory decisions, and court rulings that they believe would affect Alberta in a negative way. So let's say there was a highway project and that was going through the impact assessment process. That's the process that was created by Bill C-69, if people cast their minds back. Her argument is that we would be able to go, no, we're not going to listen to the regulatory process the federal government sets out. Rather, we are going to be able to give out our own permits and business will continue. There are some obvious problems that people have pointed out with that. But Jason Nixon and Travis Taves in particular have come down quite hard on it. And Nixon is notable because, of course, he's not in the leadership race. And he said basically that, this probably wouldn't even pass even if the United Conservatives held the entire House, and that at any rate, it would be illegal and it would be unenforceable because, who's going to listen to the Alberta government when the federal government holds enforcement powers to levy fines and things like that. So the proposal's got a lot of attention in the last few weeks, and has got quite a bit of criticism too from within the party.
Now, still with the leadership race, Tyler, we've crossed the threshold to the official candidates in the race to replace Premier Jason Kenney. And the 7 of them are Daniel Smith, who we just talked about, Brian Jean, Travis Taves, Leela Aheer, Rebecca Schultz, Todd Loewen, and Rajan Sani. Now, this means that 3 others failed to make the cut?
That's right. So the 3 others is Bill Rock, I believe, who's a Southern Alberta mayor, John Horsman, who's a businessman, and Raj Sherman, the former Liberal leader who had sort of intended to run in the race and obviously did not get very far with it. So they just sort of didn't meet the financial and paperwork sort of threshold. But the reason this is important, of course, is because now we know what that slate of candidates is going to look like unless someone else drops out over the next, 6 weeks or so here.
After the break, we have a candid response from Calgary pastor Arthur Pawlowski about his appeal win. Then we hear from his lawyer on the next steps and the rationale behind some of Alberta Health Services' strategy. Will the Crown try to appeal the appeal? The answer to that is up next. A Calgary street pastor and his brother who were jailed for defying public health orders during the COVID-19 pandemic had their appeal granted. Arthur Pawlowski and his brother David made headlines in 2021 when they were hauled off to jail for holding public church gatherings during the pandemic. We caught up with Pawlowski for his reaction to winning his appeal.
Yes, I am a little bit overwhelmed, shocked, surprised for sure, and a little bit puzzled because, telling you the truth, I pretty much give up on the justice system after seeing this tyranny unfolding for the past 2.5 years. I said, we're doomed. It's over. We have lost the check and balances. They all are one party now, just like the Nazis, just like the communists. And if you're not chirping according to the party line, then you're doomed. You will be destroyed. So this decision, at least in a little part, is restoring hope that not all is lost, that there are still some good men and women in a position of authority that actually love this country, love democracy, and love the rule of law.
After speaking with Arthur for his candid response, Jeanette Roche spoke with his longtime lawyer, Sarah Miller, for her reaction. In this interview, Sarah's response laid out the work that is still to be done.
What are the next steps in this case now that you've won this appeal for your clients? And do you expect that the government might appeal this appeal?
Because the Court of Appeal was unanimous, I'm really hoping that they won't pursue any further appeal. It would be, in my estimation, it wouldn't be successful. I feel very confidently that the Court of Appeal has done a very sound analysis here, and that the Supreme Court of Canada has far better things to do than to hear whether or not the Pawlowski should be in contempt of an order that was never served on them, never explained to them, and never named them. It just seems like a big waste of government resources, and the government is already on the hook for $50,000 at this point. So, I don't think it would be a good use of government resources, but that's up to them. So I don't expect them to appeal, but of course, there's all sorts of things I don't expect Alberta Health Services to do in this matter that they have. So we'll see where that goes. I suspect that this matter is now concluded, but because of this matter, being in the courts, being successfully pursued at the Queen's Bench level. The Poplawskis were subject to a probation. They've been charged since with breaches of probation for attending peaceful protests. And they've also been charged, or Artur Poplawski has been charged with criminal contempt of that same order when he attended a baptism service in June 2021. So I'm currently trying to work with the Crown Prosecution Service to get them to understand the decision from the Court of Appeal that really takes all the wind out of their sails for those criminal charges. I've not yet heard from them that they're going to withdraw, but hopefully that will be soon. So that's our next step, is to get these other knock-on effects caused by Justice Germain's order.
Is there something in this case that really stood out to you? I know you were mentioning before that they were never even named in the whole process.
Yeah, this whole process has shown me that the fear that is a reasonable emotional response in many circumstances has driven a lot of the I think the public's response to this case on both sides. The Alberta Health Services strategy to pursue it when it should have been clear to them that they shouldn't have, and the decision out of the Court of Queen's Bench. Fear was like the predominant thing that I felt when I read the decision out of the Court of Queen's Bench, going on and on about the pandemic and the harm of the pandemic, and language like, well, everybody knows at least one person who's died of COVID-19 in Alberta, and like that, just like to write that in a decision when at the time the rates were, I think you had to know over 1,300 people before you statistically might know one person who had died of COVID-19. It was so illogical and fear-based and not rational. But that was very surprising to me, because we come to law thinking, we're Vulcans of some nature, that we only do rational thought and legal reasoning. And it was really lacking throughout this process until we got to the Court of Appeal.
Coming up next, an Indigenous reflection on the Pope's Canadian tour. Pope Francis spoke in 3 First Nations languages on Tuesday during a sacred pilgrimage at a lake northwest of Edmonton. The pontiff joined hundreds of people at Lac St. Anne during a church service and said hello in Blackfoot, Cree, and Nakota. Earlier in the week, the Pope apologized to residential school survivors and their families for the role members of the Catholic Church played in the forced assimilation of Indigenous peoples. During his Central Alberta tour, Pope Francis also spoke about the importance of grandparents and the elderly as thousands gathered for a public mass at Edmonton's football stadium. Francis blessed and kissed young babies and children that were handed to him as he was driven through Commonwealth Stadium ahead of the service. Indigenous people at the Pope's Mass talked about his apology and messaging during the religious ceremony, which took place in Edmonton. A local member of the Blackfoot tribe was in attendance and shared with us the impact the Pope's visit had on her family.
I think it's good that he's acknowledging and he's putting in that effort, to come over here to apologize, I guess, in person, and, to make the effort to go to these certain communities. It can't be all of them, but he is putting in that effort. I know there is a lot of people that are against it and that are mad and upset, that he's here. It's like it brings up a lot of memories, like bad memories. The damage is already done. It's but I'm just trying to focus on the good, the positive. And hope that there's a lot of good that comes out of it. I just hope that he's gonna do something good for our people and to really stay true to what he's saying.
Earlier this week, Jeanette Roche sat down with University of Alberta professor Dr. Crystal Fraser. Dr. Fraser is part of the governing circle guiding the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation. Ms. Fraser's mother and grandmother were institutionalized in the Roman Catholic residential school system and believe there are some questions that still need answers to help Canadians move forward.
I would like to know, what's your impression of the Pope's visit?
Yeah, there are many impressions. I think that this visit really had multiple audiences, and for me, you obviously mentioned my professional credentials, but I'm also an intergenerational residential school survivor. My grandmother and mother were institutionalized at Catholic Indian residential schools, and this apology has really been a long time coming. We were looking for something that was more thorough and more sincere than the April 1st remarks given at Vatican City. And I think that for a lot of people, the gesture of the Pope traveling to Canada, of that ceremony at Musqueam on Monday, of this mass and all of the various activities, I really think that will help facilitate the healing process for many survivors. For other people, and perhaps myself included, I feel like the apology comes, a day late and a dollar short. That in order to really advance the pursuit of truth, which, for the record, we still don't know all there is to know about the history of residential schools, about the circumstances in which these children died and then were buried in unmarked graves. So there's a truth bit, but also the reconciliation, and reconciliation really needs action. And so we had very high hopes for this apology, but then also the expectation of accountability and an action plan that would be shared by the Catholic Church.
Okay, so you think that reconciliation could actually be achieved from this visit then? Do you think it's enough just to have that apology, or is there a solution to actually bring healing?
Yeah, I unfortunately do not think that one visit by the Pope, solves our problem of reconciliation. I think that we have a lot of other much deeper work to do, which really would tackle, systemic racism in Canada. It would give Indigenous nations their sovereignty back. We would have something else in place other than the Oppressive Indian Act. And so there's many things that need addressing. I think potentially what the Pope's visit can do is further this conversation.
Catch the full interview with Professor Fraser and BCN's Jeanette Rocher by heading over to our YouTube channel. The city of Lethbridge has seen a number of home fires recently. So, how can you prevent dangerous residential fires? A fire prevention officer with the city of Lethbridge has that answer coming up shortly.